Hey guys, welcome back to While You Were Cleaning. I'm so excited to be sharing today's Dollar Tree DIYs with you. I have seen a trend this year of fluted vases and planters, but so many of them have been out of my price range. But as soon as I saw that fluted pool noodle booster at Dollar Tree, I knew that I could create some pieces of decor out of it that would go along with this trend, but they would be a little bit more in my price tag. So I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video. We'll go ahead and we'll get into these DIYs. All right, so this is that pool noodle booster that I've been telling you about. And first off, I wanted to split it in half. So I marked at the 3-inch point going all the way around it and then cut it in half using a serrated steak knife. Serrated knives cut through foam pretty easily. And then I wanted to angle the bottom of this a little bit, so I measured up 1 inch going all the way around the bottom, and then I used that same serrated knife to cut around the bottom edge of this at an angle so that it looked a little bit more of a vase type shape instead of having that flat edge. You could always leave it flat as well if you liked that edge. Once you cut with the knife, you'll probably be left with a few little styrofoam pieces that aren't completely smooth. So just go back through with your scissors and you can trim that down a little bit and just make sure it's all even. And then on the top of this, I also wanted to angle it in a little bit. So just went ahead with my knife and went around and just cut out a little bit more out of the center of this pool noodle. And then again, once you cut this off, you'll want to go back over it with those scissors again, just trim off any little pieces and brush off any loose styrofoam. I've started to really enjoy working with plaster of Paris. It gives a really nice texture to your products. And the instructions are right there on the back. You do 2 parts of plaster of Paris and 1 part of water, and then you just want to mix all the clumps out of it. Just mix as quickly as you can, because once that water is added, it kind of activates the plaster and it will begin hardening pretty soon after you get it mixed. I used a foam brush to apply the plaster of Paris to the pool noodle booster, and I just gave it kind of a thin coat at first because the mixture was a little bit thinner at first as well before it started thickening up. So just went over it with a nice thin coat. You could also give this a thin coat of a spray paint primer or something like that, just to help this plaster adhere a little bit better to the pool noodle. I'm mostly trying to fill in any of the holes that might be on this so that I can have a little bit of a better surface. And then here I started applying the second coat, which you can see goes on a lot thicker. The plaster has started to thicken up by now, and so it's just a little bit easier to apply at this point, but it does harden pretty quickly after this, so you do have to work quickly. And your foam brush may not hold up really well against this plaster, especially if you have a Dollar Tree foam brush like I did. It does start to kind of come apart a little bit, so maybe a better quality foam brush, or I also use the spoon at some points to spread the plaster onto the pool noodle booster. And you can see at this point, my plaster has really started to thicken up. If you're willing to use your hands, you can do that as well and just spread it around. I did do that at one point or more than one point in this project, so it is a little bit easier and it does wash off just fine off of your hands. All right, so then just cover all of the sides the best you can with your plaster. You may have to mix some more. It just depends on how much you use and how thick of a coat you add. Next, I'm going to use one of these small tea light holders that I found recently at Dollar Tree. As you can see, the fluted pattern around the edge of it is very similar to the pool noodle booster, and so I'm going to use this as a base to hold that larger part that I just smothered in plaster. So I wanted this one to have a similar texture though, since the top part isn't going to be super smooth. I wanted to make sure that this kind of matched in texture, so I went ahead and coated it as well in the plaster of Paris. And once everything has dried, you can use some sandpaper on your finished project there so that you can smooth out anything. There might be a few little kind of sharper edges, and so you can use sandpaper to smooth those out. And I just use kind of a medium grit sandpaper here. Just be careful since the pool noodle booster does have some give to it since it's made of foam. If you squish that at all, it is going to cause that plaster to crack. So just be gentle with that. And then you'll want to use your sandpaper on the base of this as well, just to smooth it out to however you like it. Next, I went ahead and spray painted these with a Rust-Oleum flat white paint. I was painting a lot of things this day, so somehow I missed showing you the can of paint that I used, but it is Rust-Oleum brand 2 times. It's a paint and primer in one, and it's just a flat white shade. And I added about 2 or 3 coats to these. Once it was dry there on the bottom, I went ahead and flipped it over and added a few coats to the top as well. You just want to make sure that you completely cover up all of that blue that might be showing through. Next, you'll want to attach these 2 pieces together. So I used hot glue to do that. I just started off with a little bit of glue to hold it in place, and then I just went ahead and added some hot glue down the center to fill any gap there might have been between the 2 pieces. And for this one, I wanted to go ahead and add some greenery. So this is one that I picked up from Dollar Tree. Just went ahead and clipped them all off from the main stem. And then inside of my little vase decoration that I made, I added a round foam ball that comes in, I believe, a 3-pack at Dollar Tree. And then I just went ahead and clipped these branches a little bit shorter and then just pressed them right into that foam ball, and then you can just arrange the wire to make the greenery lay however you like it. And here's the finished project, and I love the way that this turned out. I love the fluted pattern around it. I knew as soon as I saw these 2 pieces at Dollar Tree that I could put them together to create something like this, and the finished result is amazing. Next, we're going to go ahead and use the other half of that pool noodle booster, and I have a project for that half as well. So again, this is a 3-inch piece. It's half of one of the boosters that you can get there at Dollar Tree. And I went ahead and I spread a thin coat of plaster of Paris mixed the same way. Spread that all over this booster and then let that dry kind of as a base coat. And then I went back over to add a second coat onto this. Once the plaster started thickening a lot and I was spreading that on with it being thicker, I really liked the way it looked a lot better than maybe the first project that I did. So you might want to try this instead of just the way that I spread the plaster on with the first project. I do like this one better. So I used a spoon and I was dumping it onto all of these ridges. I was filling in the gaps a little bit more so they weren't as deep. And I really like the finished texture of how this one turned out. So once all of that dried, again, I went over it with my sandpaper, just smoothed out any rough edges. And you can see here how the difference in texture is between this project and the first one. With the plaster being thicker on this one as well, it was less prone to cracking. So that is one benefit of putting it on in a thicker coat. For this second project, I'll also be using one of these shallow garden dishes that you can find there at Dollar Tree. And both of these I am going to spray in a coat of Rust-Oleum flat gray primer. And this will just really help the finished coat to adhere a little bit better. And I am using a darker coat for the finished coat. So I'll just kind of get rid of any of those lighter colors so that I have a better dark finish. Once that coat was dry, I flipped this dish over and did the inside as well. And then for the finished coat on both of these, I'm going to be using this Rust-Oleum Satin Deep Forest Green color. I really love this shade, and I did do probably about 2 or 3 coats on these as well. You kind of just have to get right in there close to it and make sure that you get in all of the cracks of that pool noodle so that you get all of that gray color or even any blue that might be peeking through, you get that completely covered. I set this dish up on a spray paint can lid so that it could finish drying, but then I could also paint the inside of it as well so that that coat could dry. So I did add that on in a few coats as well. And then here you can see how that looks all finished being painted and the texture on this. I think it looks amazing. It does have a lot of texture and does look a little bit more like a ceramic or pottery type piece. And then I'm going to be adding this bowl here to the top. So I added some hot glue all around this top edge in all of those ridges. I wanted to make sure that it stayed in place. You could also add some hot glue to the bottom of the bowl and then set this on top. So pretty much doing it the opposite way that I did as well. But this worked out pretty good. It just was hard to get it completely centered. And here you can see how that finished project turned out. I really love this one as well. And I think this was just a fun, unique way to try and use one of those pool noodles to create something that could be used as a decor piece in your home. Thank you all so much for joining me for today's video. I hope that you have enjoyed it, and let me know if you've used one of these pool noodle boosters to create your own DIY project. I'd love to see those. Thanks again for watching today, and I'll see you next time. Bye!